Welcome back to another edition of Storytime. I'm your host, Steve Hatherly, and my guest today, I'm excited. He moved to Korea from Vancouver, Canada, back in December of 2004. He taught English for a while here in this country. Did that for a period of time, took 11 months off in total in 2007. That was for his honeymoon. Who gets to take a year-long honeymoon? This guy does. I need a tip on that someday. Taught a year of high school before starting some freelancing work as an executive presentations coach. That makes me slightly nervous. Maybe I could use a tip or two from my guest today. Did that for a while. His goals in his life at that time were to get on TV and do voice acting and do some radio, and he accomplished all of those goals. In fact, we worked together on the radio for a period of time. He started his video marketing business in 2013, and that's the path that he is still currently on. He's still doing that after moving back to Vancouver in 2015. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about other things as well. Kwan is my guest for today's story time. Hey, brother, how's it going?
Hey, man, how you doing? I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me today. So excited to be here.
Absolutely. Daytime for me here, middle of the afternoon, nighttime for you there in Vancouver, right?
It is nighttime, about 9 o'clock at night. So it's getting up there, but not too bad.
Gotcha. So it's been a minute since you moved back to Vancouver. It's been 7 years since you made the trip back. Time certainly does fly.
Yeah, it's really amazing because I lived in Korea for 10 years and I've already been here for 7. So I feel like that time in Korea for the 10 years, it seemed like such a long time. Like it seemed like such a long time, right? But now I've been here for 7 years and I'm thinking, holy smokes, I'm almost here as long as I was in Korea.
I know exactly what you're feeling, because if I stay in Korea for 2 more years, and I'm sure that I probably will, half of my life have been in Korea and half of my life will have been in Canada. That's mind-blowing to think about.
Yeah, it's really insane because when I came here, our kid was, I think, 6, 7 years old, and now he's like going to be 14. So like half of his life now has already been here.
Yeah.
It's just insane to think about.
I asked you how old little Ethan was before we turned on the camera today, and you said, what, he's 13 years old now. I said, that can't be possible. He was up to my knee the last time I saw him.
He was a tiny little kid just hanging around the studio, playing on the phone and doing stuff and just basically having the time of his life there. But now he is like almost as tall as I am. He's definitely taller than his mother now. And his voice is changing and, all these things. And I just saw some videos of him as a little boy recently. And I'm like, what happened? That was not that long ago, I think. But
well, Ethan, when your son was young, you had started a YouTube project with him for him, right? How did that go in the end? Are you still doing that with him now?
He still has his own YouTube channel called How to Do Stuff with Ethan. And so he's still uploading videos and still doing that. He took a little break, but he started doing that stuff pretty early on, I think, because of just what I do. He just kind of was always just into it as well. So he enjoys it. He absolutely loves it. I think that for most kids these days, that sort of technology is not unfamiliar or it's not uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, it's not even something that they have to focus on learning, right? It's almost second nature, I would assume. You've got a really successful YouTube page as well. It's for your business. I checked it just before we started. You're around 87,000 subscribers now. Tell us a little bit about the business that you do. It's a really unique and interesting line of work.
Yeah, the YouTube channel has been incredible for my business simply because it's a video marketing business as opposed to a videography business. Now, the difference really is that, at the end, we still produce a video, but the starting point of it is always a little bit different because as a video marketing agency, I think about, well, okay, what business challenge are we trying to solve here? How do we overcome what's going on? Let's say, for example, you just don't have people that want to buy from you. Well, what kind of videos can we create to get people to want to buy from you? How can we create awareness? What can we do? Whereas a videographer might take the approach of, okay, you know what? Creatively, here's what we can do. Here's something cool and fun that we could do and put it out there, and good luck with that afterwards. Whereas I'll say, okay, how do you actually get business? What can we do to convert those people? What do we need in order to actually make this successful for you? So that YouTube channel was started a long time ago because of the presentations coaching, but because of the experience of making those videos and using videos to essentially build my own business, I was able to translate that into what I do now. So it has been a huge, massive help.
I guess the presentation coaching was not really related to anything that you're doing now, right?
Actually, funny thing is, it's very related because as a presentations coach, the big thing I always asked people was, who is your audience? Who are you
Mm,
talking to? Who are you trying to communicate with? And who are you trying to convince or motivate or inspire or whatever it might be that you're trying to do? So with videos for businesses, it's essentially the same thing where we're trying to figure out who are you actually
mm,
trying to talk to.
hmm
So my thing is always, it's the right message for the right audience. And that draws directly from the presentations experience. And also when I work with clients who need to be on camera, I can
mm,
now help them to be good on camera as well.
I
So
suppose
it all kind of tied in.
yeah, it's like a spider web of sorts, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all intertwined.
We're not here to talk business today, though. What story are you going to tell us today for story time, Carl?
Well, you slightly alluded to my son earlier, so I am going to tell the story of how my wife and I decided that we were going to homeschool our son. We'd take him out of school and sit him at home and teach him ourselves.
Really interesting. Carl, are you ready for story time?
You bet.
Let's do it. Okay, so I looked it up just before we got started today because I was curious to know. The Canadian education system is, I mean, I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I think it has a relatively good reputation, the public school system in Canada. I looked it up just before the show to see if I could find any numbers that indicated how popular homeschooling was in the country these days. The most recent statistic that I found was from 2015, and the number was like 0.5% of children are homeschooled in Canada. So that's from 7 years ago. That's from when you moved back to Vancouver. Maybe you contributed to that 0.5%. But my point is, it's still not really an overly popular thing to do. So let's go back to the beginning, Carl. Where did the idea for you and your wife to homeschool your son come from originally?
The idea for it actually came, we're still living in Korea. And this is when my son was attending daycare and kindergarten in Korea, in fact. So, in Korea, kids they go to different kind of daycares and kindergartens, and they're taught things, right? They're taught from a young age to do academics and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the school that we sent our son to was a community school, they call it. And so it was in a house. It was literally a house, like an actual house in Korea, if you can imagine. There aren't many houses, but it was in an actual house with a yard, a garden near the mountains. And there were about 4 or 5 classes of kids, and they were up to, I think, kindergarten age, so from about 4 to about 7, I believe. And they all worked and played together, and they just learned social skills. They were just given toys that were built and made by parents. They were sometimes supervised by parents, but there was no academic learning.
Hmm.
It was just, okay, let's just work on these children as humans, as individual people, to grow their social skills, to let them be free to choose what they want to do, and also learn some interesting things here as well. So, for example, he actually was like cutting vegetables with a knife, and we're all like, oh my God, what are you doing? But that's where the seed was planted that we could do education differently.
Why did you choose a school like that? Because you do have lots of different choices, even for children that age in Korea. He would have been around what, 6, 7 years old at the time?
About 5, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
even
maybe 4 or 5, actually.
even younger.
Yeah.
So why a school like that? Where did that? I mean, because that's not even necessarily down the homeschooling path, which we're going to get to in a little while. That's completely different. And I've seen some videos online where it's a kind of a controversial thing, where some parents, you might say overprotective parents. The flip side of that coin is some parents would say that's completely underprotective to let your child, play with knives. It's not playing with knives, I know, but from that extreme perspective, it is, right? But for you and your wife, you didn't think that way at all. So can you talk about that a little bit? What was that? What was that thought process like?
I think it came from my wife's own upbringing, where she was allowed to kind of explore her own creative freedoms, really, and be herself and make her own choices and not be put into a specific box. And you can imagine that growing up in Korea, to have a family that would allow you to make those kind of choices on your own, that it's quite liberating. It's quite different. So her entire upbringing was always very much, okay, you know what? I think I can make my own choices. I've always made my own choices, whether they were right or wrong. I've always been allowed to make my own choices. So let's also offer the same opportunity to our son. Let's not force him into learning certain things or have expectations of how he should be doing something. Let's let him do it. And as an example, when we used to play as a little kid, we give him a bag of flour and he would just spread it out on the floor of our living room and just go nuts on it. But we wouldn't get upset. We just let him do whatever he wanted and kind of, roll around and get dirty and whatever else. And so that's kind of how the seed was planted that we could do things differently. And I don't know if you know about things like Montessori or, Waldorf schools and things like that, where the system is more not so much based on the academic part of it, but on developing the child as a whole. And so that's kind of where the seed was planted that, okay, you know what, we can probably find different options. So while we were in Korea, when we came back to Canada, we were very excited. Kind of like you were saying, the education system in Canada is known as being very good. I mean, we get a lot of international students that come over from all over the world, and and especially from Korea as well. I remember as a teacher, a lot of parents were saying to me, "I wish I could send my child to Canada to go to school because it's so much better than here, right?" And so we thought the same thing when we came back. We thought, "Hey, you know what? It'll be great."
So your plan with your wife was to put Ethan in the Canadian public education, send him to public school. And was it because something happened in the education process here in Korea at his kindergarten where you thought, oh, okay, maybe this isn't exactly what we want for him? Why the shift? Why not just continue with that style of education after the family moved to Canada?
So while we were in Korea, after he'd finished the community school there, he'd finished kindergarten. And so obviously he'd have to go to elementary school. And so at that point, we were kind of deciding, should we move back to Canada or should we stay in Korea? And so one of the reasons why we came back was because we thought, okay, well, if we have to have him go to school in Korea, he's going to enter into a very traditional Korean education system where he will not really have a lot of free time. The fear was that he'd be, having to work on studying all the time. His love of doing things on his own and learning. And he was always very curious. I mean, all kids are, right? Like all kids love to learn. They're like sponges. They get excited about something and they just follow that, to the end of the earth, right? They'll go crazy doing one thing because they absolutely love it. And so we didn't want that to kind of fade away. And we kind of were afraid that if he went into a very strict academic system, such as the Korean education system, that love for life would be diminished in some capacity. And so we were kind of worried about that. So that was one reason why we thought, okay, maybe the time to come back to Canada would be appropriate. My parents were getting old, all these different factors.
It's not to speak poorly of the Korean education system. It is perhaps more competitive than what you were looking for at the time. Was Ethan, how were his Korean speaking skills at that point in time?
Great. He's completely fluent. I mean, he's fluent in both English and Korean because we had always known that, from the very beginning, basically, my wife would speak Korean to him. I would speak English to him, and that was the way it was going to be. And I remember this conversation with other parents. They were kind of like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Think about it. They're kids. They don't know the difference. They will just do whatever is put in front of them, and they'll just absorb it." And so that's what happened. Is that he speaks Korean. He spoke Korean fluently with his mother, and then with everyone else at school, whatever else, with his friends. And then at home, he would just speak English to me, and so it was very natural for him.
So it wasn't an issue of you were worried about, oh, maybe his Korean language skills weren't up to speed enough to be in a Korean first grade classroom. That wasn't the issue at all. It's just you didn't want him to lose that kind of fun perspective that he had developed about gaining knowledge. So when you moved back to Canada, the plan was to put him in the public education system. Did you do that for a period of time?
We did. So when we first came back, it was March. And so as you may know in the Korean system, I think it's January or February, whatever it is, that's the end of the school year, right?
Mm.
And so the new school year starts in, I believe it's March. And so we came back essentially just after he'd finished kindergarten, and we came back here, and he would have been at his age, he should have been enrolled in the first grade.
Okay.
And so we thought, you know what, we're here in March. We don't know exactly where we're going to stay yet. We're at my parents' house, and we're thinking we're not going to stay at my parents' house, obviously, forever. So we figured, you know what, let's just not even put him back in school right now.
Mm.
Let's just see what happens, right? There's no reason to put him into school for 3 months. At a new place, what's the point really? He's 6, 7 years old. Like, what is he gonna miss, right? And so we did that. We just let him hang out at home with us. We did a lot of things and activities together with him. We didn't really work on, educating him, so to speak, formally at all, because we figured, he has lots of time. He doesn't have a problem speaking English. He'll be okay as far as, just getting along in school. It won't be a problem. He's always gotten along with other kids really well. So,
Why
just let him do it.
why not that moment of panic though that a lot of parents would have, and you can't blame parents for having that reaction, I would think, when maybe he's going to fall behind for a year and then, oh no, then wait, fast forward to when he's in high school, all kids his age are going to be a year ahead of him. You didn't have those thoughts at all. Why didn't you have those thoughts at all?
My parents certainly had those thoughts. My parents were like, "Well,
Okay.
shouldn't you put him back in school? I mean, shouldn't you put him in school even just for a few months? What is he going to do? How is he going to learn, right?"
Mm.
And as I said, all kids love to learn. That was the thing that I noticed, is that we all know this, right? We see it all the time. Like, we have friends with kids, and you're like, "Oh my God, that kid's so smart. Like, look at all the stuff he's into." And so that was the same thing for him. He was just into so many different things that we didn't worry that he wasn't learning, because learning doesn't necessarily happen only inside a classroom. Kids are learning all the time. They're learning from us, they're learning from their environment, they're learning from whatever else. We didn't even have a TV at home. I mean, when we lived in Korea, we still don't have a TV now.
Mm.
We haven't had TV since 2006, I think. I haven't had TV for forever.
How are you supposed to
And
know what's
so,
going on with the Kardashians, Carl?
well, yeah, who? Who?
The disadvantage of homeschooling right there.
Right,
Uh,
exactly, exactly.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, no, but I think I don't think you'd have anyone disagree with you on that front. That children, they're constantly learning, they're sponges and things like this. So was it at that point in time when you were kind of observing him, you and your wife were observing him and thinking, well, actually, this is good for him because again, to reference your point from before, he's not losing that kind of fun attitude that he had about learning. I'm guessing you were feeling this is good for our family too, because my wife and myself and my son were spending so much time together at home. But I want to ask about, because Ethan's now old enough to know at that point, well, wait a minute, everybody else is going to school. My friends who live down the street from 9 to 3, they're all going to this place down the road, but I'm not doing that. Did you get any pushback from him? Like, hey, can I go do that? Can I go hang out with my friends? Or was he aware of what was happening at the time? And was he on board?
Well, when we first came back, obviously I had no friends here, so he had no sort of experience of having the loss of the friends kind of thing, or the connection with the friends, because we had moved from Korea and he was basically in
Mm.
Canada, and that was it. He knew nothing else except being with us. And so for that first 6, 7 months of 2015, when we were first back here, he really just was like, okay, well, I'll just hang out with mom and dad and let's go
Mm.
camping. Well, we went to Banff, we went to Jasper, did a whole bunch of stuff, kind of fun things together. Went to the beach all the time, got a place, and moved into a new home kind of thing. And so then after that was when he started going to school. That following school year in September was when he went into the second grade. And so he had no real experience of that. He just said, okay, I'm gonna now start going to school, and
Mm.
what's that going to be like? And the school is literally across the street. Like, it's literally like I look out the window and like I can see the front door of the school. I mean, it's
Okay.
so close. It's like a 30-second walk to the school, right? So so that's where he started going in September. He stayed home. He enjoyed that. We thought, great, maybe it's time for him to go and see what it's like. We live in a very good neighborhood, to be perfectly honest, and we're very fortunate that we live in an extremely well known as a good educational neighborhood as well here in the Vancouver area. And so we thought, you know what, we are done. We don't have to do anything else. We can relax. We can send him to school from 9 to 3. Afterwards, we'll take him to his, taekwondo classes and a couple of violin classes, and he'll be so happy. This is it. This is great, kind of thing. So that's what happened. We sent him to school and let him be for a little while. However, that experience there over, I guess, 2 years of him being there, it kind of started revealing things that we didn't expect with the Canadian school system, or not so much the system itself. It was more him. It was just observing the changes in him and what he was kind of going through. And we just thought, okay, we need to make a change. But the schooling was fine. I mean, he made a lot of friends. He loved being at school. He'd still be late sometimes, even though we live across the street. Because when you live closer, you tend to get up even later. But he really enjoyed the experience of being at school.
So when you talk
we
about,
kind of thought there's got to be something more.
So it wasn't that he wasn't enjoying it at all. He went there for the 2nd and the 3rd grade, but you were seeing things in him that you and your wife were unhappy with, and that led to the decision to take him out. Can I ask, do you mind? What are some of the things that you're talking about?
The funny thing is, it's not anything negative. I mean, he has always been a super happy-go-lucky child. He still is. He still was. It's just that when he was at home, he wanted to continue learning. He would read books. He would find things to do that he was interested in. He was building things all the time. He would want to be creative and try and just figure something out or make something or just do something. And he always had this curiosity. And so over the period of time for the couple of years at school, even though it's only the 2nd and 3rd grade, I mean, what are they really doing? There's not really any homework or anything, right? There's nothing really to do. But because he was there for the entire day, and then afterwards, he wasn't doing a lot of activities. We only had him in 2 activities. It was only just violin, taekwondo 3, violin once a week, taekwondo twice a week, and 1 swimming lesson once a week. It wasn't even a lot. And so, but we saw that he wasn't able to have time to do the things he wanted to do, because he'd come home and it'd be like 7, 8, 9 o'clock, and he wouldn't have the time to really delve into the things that he was still interested in. And so we saw that. And then a couple things at the school as well, where we can actually go and observe the class. Parents are allowed to come in once a month and see what's happening in the classroom. And so I was, I would be the one to go, and I would just see how the teachers would act whenever. I thought, okay, this is fine. It seemed okay. Until one time when it just sort of changed everything for me and for my wife as well. And what happened was, the teacher was asking the students to write down 5 words that were related to education. Right? 5 words, just 5 things, or 5 things you think about as education. So you're in grade 3, right? What are you going to write, right? So you wrote down 5 words. The teacher comes over and she looks at the 5 words and she says, maybe you should have written, why didn't you put internet? Right? Why didn't you put internet? Because he didn't really use the internet at the time, to be perfectly honest. He was into reading. He was into, learning from books and doing things creatively. And so that's what he put down for the 5 words that he was,
Do you remember what the 5 words were? Do you remember what they were?
Oh God, I wish I could remember them. But I do remember he wrote down books. I do remember him writing down things like just playing, just things that, that were not online related. They were not from using the internet. They were not from using technology. They're essentially just him trying to learn things on his own, kind of thing. And so the teacher said this. She said, why didn't you put down internet? And she was very nice about it. She wasn't like, why didn't you put down? She was like, oh, why didn't you put down internet? And his entire demeanor, his mood just went his shoulders just drooped. And I just thought, oh, really? Like that? He didn't do anything wrong. But what I found out was that the school had a mandate for wanting to push kids into using more online learning.
Okay.
And so that's why she was saying, why didn't you put down internet? Because she wanted all the kids, apparently the school wanted all the kids to start really getting the internet. And, by the next year, they were also using laptops in school, kind of thing, right?
Did he feel like, I don't know if you asked him why he reacted like that, but maybe he felt like he had given a wrong answer, and she was not scolding him per se, but disappointed in him somehow, maybe?
Yeah, that was exactly the feeling that I
Mm,
got from him, was that he felt that he did something wrong. And I even said to him, I
mm,
go, I said to him that time, I very clearly remember saying to him, don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. Your answers are totally fine. They just wanted kids to use the internet.
mm,
And this was from a young teacher. This is from a teacher who I thought would be, more progressive, more liberal, and in the sense of,
mm,
she's a modern education, type of thing, and just a new teacher coming into the system and being able to bring fresh ideas and not be so old school. And so when that happened, I came home and the first thing I said to my wife was, I think we need to figure out a different way to have Ethan educated, because and I explained the whole situation to her, and she was equally surprised that this had
mm,
happened. And up to that point, I still had so much confidence in the system here. I thought, you know what, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. What can they possibly do? He's like, he's in elementary school. You don't learn anything in elementary school, really, right? Like you learn just to play and do the basics of like math or whatever, and reading and writing, the basics.
mm,
So what's he really going to miss out on, kind of thing, right? Or what's he really learning? And so at that point, we started thinking about, well, what other options are available to us? And so we really didn't know. And I just started researching a little bit, doing more, do we need to change schools? Is it just because the public education system is like this? Do we need to find a private school? Do we need to, do something else that way? Do we need to
mm.
go somewhere else, right? We love living here. We don't want to move, but, is there something else we could do instead? And at some point, my wife had already mentioned homeschooling at some point, because we had talked about it, when we had the experience when he first came back to Canada. And so we talked a little bit about homeschooling, but homeschooling didn't really appeal to us in the traditional sense,
Okay.
because, right, you think homeschooling, it's basically you learn the same stuff at school that you do, right, in school, but you just do it at home.
Mm,
And we thought, well, what's the point of that? That you just send him back to school. If he's going to learn
mm.
the same things that's, at home, just send him back to school. Until one day, I found out about something called unschooling.
Okay.
Now, have you heard of unschooling?
Is that that was the term that came to mind for me when you were talking about his kindergarten experience, where kids are just kind of outside in nature, just kind of doing whatever they want, and you just kind of present them with things. And that was the video that I was talking about, where I remember that there was a kid in the video that I saw. There was a kid not playing with a knife, but he was doing something with a knife and like cutting a tree branch or something like that. And he was very young. And the educators who were there observing and making sure the children were safe, I think the person interviewing was asking them, like, do you think that's okay? A lot of parents would think that that's not a safe thing for that child to be doing. And the educator said, this is exactly what this is designed to be, is just let the kids figure out what they want to do on their own. You just provide them with the tools and then they figure it out. Is that what unschooling is?
Essentially, that's it. So it was actually developed in the 1970s by a man named John Holt, I believe his name is. And he was sort of the founding father of this unschooling movement. And it was essentially that. It was letting children learn by following their passions.
Hmm.
So, as I mentioned from the very beginning, all kids have things they're interested in. All kids have things they love. I'm sure when you were a kid, you had things that you absolutely loved doing, right? Everybody does. And so imagine if you could actually just spend all day doing that. Or if it wasn't that, then you get tired of one thing, you start doing something else.
Hmm.
But from that, as you mentioned, we can present resources, we can present opportunities for him to learn. And so that's what we came across, was this whole idea of unschooling, that we could do this. And we also found out that the BC government, the British Columbia government here, supports homeschooling. They actually have one of the best homeschooling support systems and networks in the entire country.
Hmm.
And so there's funding, there's different types of programs you can enroll in and things like that, and different communities you can kind of get in. And so we thought, you know what? I think this is the way to go. And so we presented this to Ethan, because we've always, we didn't want to just force it on him,
Hmm.
but we told him, look, here's what we think, and here's what we, think might be good for you. Would you like to give it a try? Because you can always go back. If you don't like it, you can always just go back
Fair,
across the street to school.
fair point.
Right?
Yeah.
It's easy enough to go back, right?
Hmm.
You're not going to miss out on anything. And so he was into it. And so we took the dive, we took the plunge. We found a program here that we could enroll him in that would essentially say that, okay, he is enrolled as a distance education or home learner, and he'd be able to get funding from the government to pay for certain programs. This program we're enrolled in, they would even provide a BC certified teacher that would check in on him every single week. We'd have to send her a report, or him or her a report every single week,
Okay.
to say, here's what he did over this past week. They would then take that and say, okay, that would be the equivalent of, so you made some, cookies with your mom and dad. So obviously you had to practice, measuring and counting and, weighing things and doing
That's
things.
math.
So
That's the math equivalent.
there you go. There's math. There's some reading. There's some, social skills there being built, right?
Huh.
So you're learning. So you're always, like I said, you're constantly learning. No matter what you do, you're constantly learning, as I was talking about earlier. And he loved to read, and so we were like, oh, go ahead, read all day long. He really loved math from a young age because we never taught him that math was hard. We always just said, oh, math's really fun, and math is everywhere, type of thing. And so he was really into math, and so he would just start reading and learning about math, and just all on his own. And he loved, for example, origami, and he discovered the connection between origami and math. So all these things he could start interconnecting and getting deeper into understanding the world around him on his own.
Would you say that this decision then might not be for everyone? Because it sounds like you just presented this to your child and he took the reins, and because he was able to kind of lead himself with your assistance and with your wife's assistance, it works for him, it works for your family. But that's probably not true to say about every single child and every single family. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. That is absolutely true. We are in, I guess, a fortunate situation where my wife can be a stay-at-home mom, where she could be home with him as he was doing this. We have the one child. We didn't have to worry about a second one. That would we do this for both of them? So we were in a very ideal sort of scenario that we could do this, because other parents that we have told, since that time, I understand that they can't do it. They simply just cannot do it practically because maybe both parents have to work. Maybe they have
logistically,
more
it
than one
might be.
child.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Exactly, right? So
You've been talking about the advantages a lot. Did you run into any troubles? Because this went on for years, right? And there's a change in Ethan's education coming up pretty soon that you'll talk about, I'm sure. But this went on for many years, right? How many years in total did you do this style for?
So this year it would be his, I think, fourth year. So we started when he was in grade 4. So it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, fifth year now. This will be his fifth year of doing this.
5 years.
Yeah, fifth year of doing this. 5 years
in total. You talked about the advantages. Did you see along his path anything that made you think like, oh, maybe this isn't the most advantageous thing to do?
The one of the things that we were looking for when we first started this was the freedom, right? The freedom to make those choices, the freedom to do things. We bought a Volkswagen Westphalia camper van that same year and went
awesome.
and
The
took a
Scooby-Doo
2.5 month road trip, right?
Scooby-Doo
right.
Van? Awesome.
Yeah, we went all the way to your hometown. You know what I mean? Like we went all the way we even went all the way to St. John's, Newfoundland. I mean, we took the thing all the way across the country, right?
Yeah.
And so that was one of the reasons we thought, we could educate him on the road. He would have all this, experience, and he made friends. He even made a friend on Halloween, like the day before Halloween, in St. John's, Newfoundland, where they invited him to go trick-or-treating with them. So we ended up making a costume, and he went trick-or-treating. So he had a great experience of just having that freedom. But we did have to plan. We did have to say, okay, what are we going to actually do or try to accomplish this year? Because we still needed to meet some sort of educational requirements for the Ministry of Education kind of thing. I mean, it's not difficult, but you had to do it. Right?
You had to do that. And then I'm sure, too, that you had to have him on some kind of a schedule, too, because that would probably be good for him. Or is it the complete opposite where there's no real schedule at all and just, eat when you're hungry, take a nap when you're tired, and study when you want to study?
Yeah. Go to the bathroom, you got to go kind of thing, right? Go, you got to go.
Yeah.
Part of the whole unschooling thing is that there's also a deschooling part of it for not only the child, but for the parents as well. Because we all grew up having to think about things in that term. And
Sure.
especially,
And that's what
you
we
know,
know, right? I mean, we don't know anything outside of that. I mean, you're
right,
talking
right.
about reinventing the wheel here, essentially.
Right, exactly, right.
Mm.
But it's just so outside of what other people would do.
Yeah.
And my parents, for example, very traditional, Chinese family, whatever. They for years they were worried all the time. Like, what are we doing? What are you guys doing? Like, does he have to? Are you
Right.
sure he's learning? And so as far as like a schedule is concerned, yeah, we just said, okay, well, here are things that you should probably be doing, at this time. Just kind of, go ahead and do it. But at that time, he really didn't need that kind of supervision because he just was so into what he was doing that he would literally just spend the entire day. We'd have to tell him to stop,
Hmm.
right? I mean, but as he got older, then we did have to sort of work in more of a schedule of a discipline and about learning to be a little bit more,
Hmm.
what can I say, organized, so that you could get certain things done. And
Structured.
we also structured, and we also recognize that he may not do this forever, right? We kind of thought he may not do it forever, but he was thriving. I mean, he was last year and the year before, last year when he was in grade 7, he was doing grade 11 level math,
Hmm.
right? He would understand. He would teach his mother. Like he would learn about it, and then he would teach his mom. Oh, this is quadratic equations or whatever else, kind of thing. Like,
Oh,
things
my
that would make
brain
our heads
just hurt a
explode,
little bit for a second.
right? Exactly. It would make our heads explode.
Yeah.
But he understood it. Not that he was good at it. Like, if you gave him a test, he probably wouldn't, pass it, kind of thing, right? But he understood it.
I think I'm seeing one of the advantages now is that he loved math. He was good at math. So when he was done with a topic, if he was done with grade 3, 4, 5, 6 math, when you're in the public education system, you're on their schedule. It doesn't matter whether you've got a firm grasp of it or not. You can't move on until they move you on into the next grade. But when you're doing the unschooling or the homeschooling, if the child has a firm understanding of grade 5 math, okay, let's move on to grade 6 math. Meaning when they're ready to move on, then they go at their own pace, right? And sometimes that could be slower. And sometimes and there's the flip side of that coin too, right? I didn't even think about that. If they understand it firmly, they can move on to the next level. If they don't, they can take more time and they can do it at their own pace until they figure it out and they're ready to move on.
And the other thing about that is that it was really interesting is that some of the basics of math, as an example, math is a great example. Some of the basics of math, like, multiplication table, some, basic, 2-number addition things or whatever. He didn't necessarily know how to do those very well. He knew how to do them, but he wasn't interested in those. He was interested in formulas and equations and all these sort of complicated mathematical subjects because he found them fascinating. And so he would learn about them. He would understand them. He could explain them back to you how to do them. He would watch, university or high school level, programs on the internet or whatever. He would understand these things and be able to communicate about them. We even he loved space as well. We even went to a lecture being given by a scientist, like an astrophysicist or whatever, talking about the creation and function of the universe and black holes and whatever. And Nathan just sat there like, oh yeah, I totally get all this stuff. I know all this stuff already, But the basics of it, he could always come back to. So that's what sort of happened is that some things he wasn't as good at, he just came back to them. But exactly the advantage was that he could, all right, just, I'm not interested in multiplication tables right now. I just want to learn how to, I just want to learn how these, functions work, how these equations work, because that seems really fascinating to me.
Were there any issues, I'm wondering, perhaps of separation anxiety or anything like that, where Ethan would have to do things on a more independent side of things, if you will? I'm just wondering that because it's a lot of time spent with mom and dad at home. So I was wondering, was there any difficulty in kind of getting him to be more independent on a social side?
Yeah, that is always the other side of it, where people are always like, probably the second question people always ask me is, how does he get any social interaction? Right? That's probably the biggest thing. And he's always been a very outgoing, friendly kid. Like, he makes friends like that. Like, he goes and he used to run up to the kids in playgrounds and just start talking to them and playing with them. And he would just easily make friends. So we never worried about that part of it. And, he was doing Taekwondo, he was doing other classes, he was involved in other activities where he was interacting with other kids, and we would constantly check in with him as well. do you, and he has friends, like he made friends in elementary school and he hung out with those friends. And he would, in the morning we'd go for a walk or a jog or whatever. And he would be, running by his friends who were all going to school. And he would wave at them and be like, kind of thing, right? I'm just going the opposite way. Exactly. I'm going the opposite way. I'm going just around the block and then going back home and, enjoying my books, enjoying reading Harry Potter while you guys go to school. So he didn't have that because he would go to school after. Like the kids would finish school at 3. He would just go over and play with them after. Right? So he didn't ever have that sense of, okay, I'm always with mom and dad. And, but one thing you did mention earlier was that, the relationship with our family. I think over the last 4 or 5 years, that has really just grown a lot deeper because we're always together. And so I always think it's a really, really fortunate and fortunate situation that we can be in where we're able to spend this sort of very formative years of his life, building this relationship with him where, he's going to remember this probably for the rest of his life that he did this with mom and dad.
No question.
Right? And so, how many kids get to do that? How many families get to have, mom and dad together? And
0.5% of Canadian children as of 2015. That's how many, statistically speaking, percentage wise. So let's bring it to modern day, because you said that he did this. This is his 5th year, but you are sending him back for the 9th grade of public school, correct?
Yeah, we are. So the decision sort of came over the last maybe couple of years. We've been kind of thinking about it. And the main reason for it was that we started thinking, okay, he enjoys what he enjoys. He loves learning. He, has all this knowledge and he loves this whole situation. However, what if there are things that he doesn't know that he would be interested in? And also we were starting to think, okay, what, it's grade 8, okay, maybe now high school, you gotta start thinking about being a little more structured and, and things like that. And so we actually put him into just like the homeschooling program for just math 8s and science 8, just to see what that was like. And he quite liked the structure of it. He was like, oh, they just have to do this. That's it. Okay, I'll just do this and then hand it in and, I'm done, right? Kind of thing for the day. So he started getting into that a little bit and he started enjoying that too. So we kind of thought, okay, maybe it's time to transition him back. And one of the negative things that we've experienced, I guess we can talk about that, is that, the struggle of sometimes us watching him not doing something, right? Where we think, oh, he should really be doing something. And so there'd be a little bit of a bit of tension there and a bit of a struggle there of like, okay, Ethan, you need to you actually need to do some of your work here. You probably need to spend a few hours doing your work. You can't just be, doing it. And you can't just do it like, half-assed and then go and, do whatever you want after kind of thing, right? You actually got to start developing some discipline and whatever else. And so that was starting to become a bit of an issue as well. Not a big issue, but it was one of those things where like, okay, something to start working on because, maturity level, things like that, you're probably going to start, that. And then also high school, the experience of being in high school is not great, it's not like the best experience. But we figured, what, maybe it's time you kind of got into that and he knows everyone there. I mean, he's grown up with them already.
Yeah, but so I would think
maybe it's time to go back.
I would think that, sure, high school, the very formative years, of course. But I would think that putting him in a scenario where things might not be so easy every day. Things might not be so fun every day. Maybe there will be some social struggles. Maybe there will be a girl that he has a crush on or someone that he has a crush on that doesn't, like an unrequited love, and he'll have to learn about that. So like some of the hardships of being in high school, it's also advantageous to your development as a young person too, I would think, right?
Absolutely that. And we kind of thought, it is time for that because we can't show him or give him those experiences at home. Right. Yeah. We are very limited. And, I'm not the brightest person in the world. We can't, we never had to teach him anyway, but, there's only so much that we could work with him. Yeah. And, if he's going to start learning more things and, he needs to be in that environment where he can. So that sort of social interaction with those kids, the group learning, the different things that they have in clubs and programs that they have now at schools. It's really different than when you and I were in school.
Bouncing ideas off of other children in the classroom, learning different perspectives, learning different opinions, different ways of thinking. Yeah, really important. And I guess he's not nervous because he's going to school with his friends who live in the neighborhood anyway. So he already knows everybody, right?
Yeah, and he's been making these YouTube videos for years. So
Yeah.
he has that confidence already. He's doing,
Mm,
in his Taekwondo program, he's a black belt in Taekwondo now. So he has he's joined the leadership program there, where they've actually invite kids who they think are ready to become leaders. And so he's doing, I think, 4 classes a week now, where he's essentially helping other kids learn how to do Taekwondo, right?
wow, that's really
He's
cool.
also right, he's taken like other leadership programs in the summer that he's really enjoyed. He just really, and his symphony program that he's in, the teacher's like, hey, Lethan, I want to give you some leadership opportunities here because I think that you can help these other kids learn.
Mm,
And so he has that confidence already, and so I don't see that it would be a problem for him to kind of go into the school. And like you said, he already knows everybody there. We were like, he was a little bit nervous, of course, when we presented this idea to him. But we just said, well, look, here are the reasons, and we think that it'd be good for you in this way, and he understood. And we also said, he was a little bit nervous about, making friends, and we go, you already know all the kids there. These are kids you've grown up with already. Like they're
yeah.
not kids. There'd be a lot more other kids you don't know, sure, but
Yeah.
most of the kids you already know. Like it won't be a problem. So
What
so
an
so now he's actually excited.
What an interesting path for him, and what an interesting set of decisions that you and your wife made together, where you just presented something to him, you watched him. If he was flourishing, then you continued to allow him down that path. And then when there came a time when you thought, okay, I'm seeing something here, we're seeing something here that we don't love, let's make a change for him now. And you've just kind of monitored him the whole way. And whatever you thought was best for him, you presented it to him, asked him his thoughts on it. And then as a family, you make a decision together. That's pretty progressive, Carl. That's pretty awesome that you've been able to do. Not like you said before, not everybody could do this potentially, but it worked for your family. And it sounds like not only did it work, it really, really worked.
It really works. I mean, I don't want people to think that it was easy. I mean, there were definitely some struggles and definitely some tears and definitely some yelling and, so it wasn't exactly easy, but I think the overall experience, I don't think we would trade it for anything. We would definitely,
Wow.
if you can do it, we would recommend it. But again, like I said, there's a whole aspect of parents just need to kind of let go of their notions of what education should be as well if you're going to do this. But the overall experience has been fantastic.
Really cool story, Carl. Thanks for being on Story Time, man. It was really great. It was really great to hear all of those details. I didn't know about those before. Want to share your socials with us before we finish up?
Yeah, sure. So if you're interested in learning more about myself, you can always look me up on YouTube. You'll see my YouTube channel there. And if you happen to be in the market for learning about what I do as far as my business is concerned, you can just look up Kwan Multimedia, and that you'll find me online everywhere.
Carl Kwan, thanks for being on Story Time today, brother.
Thanks for having me, Steve Hatherly. Good to see you.
Take care. Once again, thank you to my guest, Carl Kwan. Education is always such an interesting topic, right? But to learn about homeschooling and unschooling and all the other options that are out there was really, really interesting. That was a lot of fun for me. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Don't forget, hit subscribe, hit like, share the video. All of those things bring you much love from me.